So the market dialogue is essentially, it's an opportunity to explore a particular topic through conversations with your stakeholders. Okay. It sits very nicely alongside the business models package, but we are doing it as a separate package because we wanted to put a focus on it, to give you all an opportunity to do a market dialogue. It doesn't have to be related to your business models work, although it can be, and we'll talk a bit more about that in just a moment. But it's essentially, it's an opportunity to have conversations with stakeholders. The key thing to note is that it's not the same. It can include market, it can be a way of doing market research, but it's not the same as market research. And it most definitely is not something that you sort of sit at your desk looking up statistics and things like that. It's the dialogue bit is the essential part. You need to be having a two-way conversation where you are gathering information from stakeholders and contributing your ideas into the process as well. And it's intended to be something that can really sort of stimulate new partnerships, new relationships, new approaches to problems, new ways of thinking about problems, this kind of thing. So what we're going to talk about today is what you need to do for the capacity building package, which is essentially three things, which is to start off with, make a plan, and we'll tell you today what needs to be in that plan. Then you're going to need to go and do the market dialogue. And thirdly, you're going to need to follow up both with the participants and submit a brief report to us. And those might be the same thing or they might be different. So we're going to start off by thinking about why you might want to have a market dialogue. So it's really important, I would suggest, for you to spend a bit of time thinking about what objectives you might have and what might be a suitable topic for the dialogue. It could be that you use this opportunity to explore a particular situation. So that might be, maybe you are offering a training as a business model and you're not getting the number of sign-ups that you think you should be getting for it. Maybe you want to organize a market dialogue around that topic to explore why something isn't working well. It could also be about an activity that you're doing that is not getting the right responses from the right people. So maybe you want to think about how can we encourage more people with disabilities into using our makerspace? You might want to explore that situation. You could organise a market dialogue around that sort of topic. You might want to use it to investigate a new business model. So let's say you are thinking about going into custom product design. You might convene a market dialogue around that, where you talk to potential customers, regulators, other people who are in the industry, partners who you would need to work with if you were to make that business model successful, that kind of thing. So you could use it in that way. You could also use it as a way to encourage conversations in your community that aren't happening at the aren't happening in the way that you think they should be doing. And a bit later on, we're going to hear a really exciting example from Martin of Fab Lab Winam on some work that they've done in the past, bringing together the informal sector and some government stakeholders. So it could be something like that. So moving on to planning your market dialogue. When you're developing a plan for your market dialogue, you should be able to answer all of these questions. So some of them are about what you're going to do during and after the market dialogue, but you should still know how you're planning to answer those questions at the planning stage. So the place to start is the why, what we've just been talking about. So what you want to get out of the dialogue. And then have a think about, who needs to be part of that conversation. And then the rest of the questions really are going to flow from those two. So that's very much the place to start. So once you've got an idea of who needs to be involved, you can think about what format of dialogue is going to work best to help you achieve your objectives and that's going to work for your participants. And when I say what format, so it could be that the market dialogue is an event, so an in-person event maybe held at your space, where you invite people to spend an afternoon with you. You might lay on some refreshments. You might have, you know, an introductory speech, and then get people to work in small groups on a project, you know, on particular topics, and then sort of feedback to the general thing at the end. Or you might find that there is an event happening near you that you could tag onto, and that, you know, that some stakeholders are already going to be there, for example, and you could bring in another group and encourage some sort of a dialogue in that way. It could also, it doesn't have to be everyone together in one place talking at the same time. It could be a series of smaller dialogues that could be just with you, like interviewing different people asynchronously. I think that might be it could be the right format in some situations, but I think you're likely to get richer results if you also create a way for the different stakeholder groups to interact with each other. But you might have like a series of online small group discussions with sort of representatives from different stakeholder groups, something like that. Or you might, it might be that you're wanting to figure out how to work better with artisans in your community, and that you are going to take somebody, take some people around with you and go and visit artisans in their workshops and have conversations there. That could be an option. So there can be lots of different formats that in which this can take place, but it's about encouraging the conversation and the dialogue. So once you've figured out the format, you can start working on the actual logistics of where and how it's going to be held. And, you know, you will need to do the organization to make sure that that happens. But you also need to think about what questions you're going to ask or how you're going to frame the work. So it might be questions that you pose, or it might be giving a structure to people to work on in small groups. One of the examples that I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on today is a market dialogue I was involved in that UNICEF did with their suppliers and partners in Kenya. And in that situation, they were exploring a problem around a process of getting kits to the people that they give kits to. And so it made sense to frame the work, organize the market dialogue around different stages in the process and have different groups discussing different stages of the process. All of these things are things that you can discuss with your mentor in the business models work, you know, or you know, reach out to anybody in the group for feedback when you've got some ideas. We're not wanting to be prescriptive about how you do the market dialogue. So I don't want to provide too much structure and say it has to be done like this, but at the same time, I realize that can make it hard to kind of contextualize it, figure out, you know, what actually would be a good way to do it. So yeah, do feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation today. You can have dedicated time at the end of the presentation and, you know, through the coming days and weeks. So moving on from the things that you need to think about before the market dialogue, again, when you're making your plan, you also want to think about what's going to happen during the dialogue, whether that is one event or a series of events or conversations. Think about things like how you're going to encourage everyone to participate. So, you know, for example, are there different like power imbalances between different stakeholders that you're going to invite into the dialogue, and how can you make sure that everyone feels comfortable and feels able to speak up? You know, can you make sure that people with, you know, different levels of literacy are able to contribute effectively to the dialogue? Can you make sure that, you know, that women are able to to take part fully, this kind of thing. And also think about how you're going to document what happens and what ideas come out of having the dialogue. And then finally, again, while you're making your plan, think about what you're going to do with the outputs of the dialogue. So are you going to take decisions based on them? Are you going to, you know, is it going to be like the start of a process where you want to have the same stakeholder group meeting again in the future? You know, these kind of ideas. Think about how you're going to give feedback to participants. So when people have given up their time and come to your event or interview or whatever it is, you know, it's good if you can feedback to them how what they've shared is going to be used. And think about what format your report back to us is going to take. So that's everything on the planning. Just a reminder that the stages that you need to do are make a plan that covers all of those topics that we've just talked about. Then you're going to conduct your market dialogue, which should be fairly straightforward once you've made that plan. And finally, you're going to follow up with the participants and submit a report to us. And I just wanted to say a couple of words about the report to us. It does not need to be long or detailed. It can be in any format you want. So, for example, if you have a blog and you would like to write a blog post for your own blog about it, that can count as the report to us. That's fine. If you want, you know, I would definitely encourage you to use photos in it. You could make a video report if you wanted to. You know, if you're, yeah, think about how you might like to document it and let us know. But the content that I'd like it to cover are just briefly what happened, what was the sort of market dialogue you had and who came. Did it meet your objectives that you'd set out in your plan, and why or why not? And what is going to change as a result of the dialogue? So, and this, you know, you might be able to answer this in half a page or something. This is not intended to be a long and detailed report. But as I said, it would be great to have some, have these questions answered and also have some visuals, some photos or video or whatever. So with that, we're going to dive into a couple of examples. In fact, I might just pause and ask if there's any questions yet at this stage. There will, of course, be more opportunity to ask questions as well. In that case, could we go to Martin? And Martin, you were going to share a bit about the Gumzo workshops that you've run before.
Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. I'm glad to be here once again, and I can see a lot of people whom I know here. Yes. So I don't know, am I loud enough?
You're loud enough. I can hear you well. Oh, and now I can see you as well. Fantastic.
All right.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. Gertrude, I hope you can hear me. It's long.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. So I just want to share about our market dialogue. Actually, when we were doing it, I didn't know that it might be called a market dialogue. With us, we were just doing our thing. And we gave it a name called Gumzo Workshops. So for those who come from East Africa, who understand Swahili, Gumzo just mean chat or maybe discussion. So in our approach of trying to work with the local artisans, who are known as Juakali, they are not easy to reach, because in most cases they don't come to the space, because most of their work, they work from, I can call it from hand to mouth. They do daily work where if they miss to be at their workplace, they will not get food to go home with. So if you organize a workshop and you invite them, they will give you a budget. They'll ask you if you are going to give them food during that event, if you are going to provide their fare, if you are going to give them money for the day. And so we wanted to find out what what could be the problem and how can we reach them? Because many occasions also, if you invite them in those meetings, it is their leaders who come, and those leaders end up not giving information back. So we crafted a Gumzo workshop. I must say that we got a small funding from AfriLabs, and it was purely virtual. The funding was for virtual stakeholder meetings. But with me, I told them that the kind of clients I'm dealing with, the virtual sessions will not be good. So I was allowed to do my physical meeting. So we decided to go to various workshops where they work and have conversations with them. And our conversations, we made sure that it was as casual as possible. What I mean is that people don't need to sit together as if you want to teach them something. We just go where they are and we start a discussion with them, and people contribute to that. And of course, during that time, we can take a drink, like a soft drink or tea at that time, and people just come together and we discuss the challenges. So one thing which we are making sure that we are doing is that we are having our own set of questions, and many times also we could only ask one or two questions, and the rest they could take a lead, because we knew the direction where we want to go. We wanted to understand their challenges, and we believed that they have the answers. So that is how we had a lot of those meetings in different workshops. And with that, they ended up giving us some of the challenges, because when we were leaving our space to there, our intention was to help them use the machines we have for digital fabrication. But with them, what was top in their priority was they wanted market for the products, how bad their products look. Because what we were saying is that most products they have are not competing in the markets because they are of low quality in terms of aesthetics. But and so we were looking into how can we help in improving the quality of the products. But when we had a lot of conversations with them, they told us that what we want is to go to the market, regardless of how our products look like. We want to go to the market. And that, of course, they listed a number of problems, and some of them were lack of support from the government and stakeholders. And this one was cutting across both government and various stakeholders like financiers and different development partners. And there were also lack of documentation. As much as we can easily say that the informal sector should remain informal, but then if they remain entirely informal, then they miss out from a lot of opportunities. For example, Kenya has an opportunity for young people called AGPO, that is access to government procurement opportunities. So when you are a youth below 35 years old and you are able to get an AGPO certificate, then whenever government announces some tenders, you can bid and you have a chance. Once you put that certificate, then you have a better chance of being considered, because I think there's a percentage of bids which must come from youths. So for them to get those documents, they must have some things, including they must have their business registered, whether business name, limited company, whichever way, but the business must be registered. They must have bank account. They must have a tax compliance certificate. But if you go to those spaces, rarely do they have these things. When we were speaking to them, in fact, most of them did not even know about all these opportunities. So during those periods, we were able to bring in different stakeholders. For example, we went to the government, the people who are in charge of AGPO, and we were given some trainer to go with them to have conversation around that. We also went to the Revenue Authority team and asked for some officers who went there to explain to them the importance of even having tax compliance certification, and also how they have been accumulating penalties for not filling their returns every year, because most of them have a tax certificate, but they have no idea. So after all the Gumzo workshops, we finally organized what we called a stakeholder meeting, where we now invited different government stakeholders together with the Juakali artisans. Of course, we had to agree with them from all these workshops. They were sending for us, from each workshop, they were sending for us at least 5 people, even though by the end of the day, the number was very low, but at least they were able to send for us a number of them. So this workshop was held in our space, and we had different government stakeholders, including the one in charge of quality control, the CAPS. We had the ones for intellectual property. For example, again, when you talk about intellectual property, you'll find out that in those spaces, one person comes up with a new design, and within 2 weeks, 1,000 people have same design. And so those are some of the gaps of knowledge that we were giving them, that there's a way in which you can patent your design and you are able to make more money from it than when you just do it and everyone else copies it and everything goes on. So we brought in all these stakeholders, we sat together, and there was, we were having a panel discussion, and every panel discussion had at least one person from Juakali, one person from government, one person from corporate. And these discussions were very important, because even the banks themselves, or microfinance, they have packages for the so-called Juakali, but they don't talk to them. So a lot of people make decisions about them, but they don't talk to them. So with that discussion, both sides were able to understand what is happening from the other end and how best people can work together. Even though I promised that I would do much of this with them, but not so much went on. But later on, we were able to build a marketplace, because their demand was to get the market. But that marketplace is still work in progress. We've not fully finished it, even though we had launched it, but we've not fully finished it. And to me, that was a big step, because we were able to go by what they want, despite the fact that in our minds we were thinking that their problem is the other way. Of course, I still believe that the biggest problem they have is low quality of their products, of course, because they also lack information. But with them, they really don't prioritize getting that information. They don't prioritize getting the quality. What they want is how they can make money with the products they have, regardless of how low it is, simply because also without much support, they entirely depend on what they sell each day. So waiting to come up with a very good quality so that it can fetch much money, with them, they don't have that patience. So I can say that is all about it. You can ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing that with us. There's lots I love about what you did. I'd just like to highlight a couple of things in the reasons why I asked Martin to share his experience. And in just a moment, I'll come to any questions for Martin. But I just want to highlight the fact that, first of all, Martin did this in the past and didn't call it a market dialogue. And I think that many of you may have done some format of something like this. It's about speaking to your community, and it might not have been labeled market dialogue, but that's absolutely the kind of thing that we're trying to get at here. I love that Fab Lab Winam made such efforts to meet people, like going to their own workshops and like finding ways, once they were having the workshop in their event, the event in their own workshop to make sure that, for example, every panel discussion included somebody from the informal sector. So they're finding ways to be, you know, really inclusive about doing this. I think it's fantastic that they went where it led. So they started out with a set of ideas about, you know, we want to encourage people to come and use machines at our workshop. But that's not, once they got into a conversation, and this is the dialogue part, they realized that the priorities of the artisans were different than that, you know, as Martin told us. And so they went where that followed. And that's, I think, really important and something that I'd encourage you to do. So don't feel like just because you've said something in your plan that you need to keep going along that route. If the outcome of the dialogue is pushing you in a different direction, then absolutely follow that and go and see what happens. Steve, I've got you see you've got your hand up. I'd like to invite you to come in. Steve, did you want to ask a question to Martin or something?
I did. Sorry, it takes me a little while to get the controls going. Thanks, Martin. That was very insightful. Just want to understand the framing of it, though, specifically with the outcomes. So you were saying that you felt the sort of their main challenge from your perspective was the desirability of their product, and they asked for access to market. So have you given them what they've asked for but not what they need, or have you seen that they were actually correct, that they didn't really need to improve their quality, they could still, you're able to help them get access to market that they didn't have before? So I'm trying to define if it's not just about making people happy and giving them what they want, but how do you match make the desires or the demands or the requests with what actually is going to have an impact? So you didn't really explain if the marketplace had an impact or if it was just a case of getting that group of people on board. And then is it a case of your market is to get third-party funding to work with that group, and so by engaging them you've created a market for yourself? Or is it you're obviously mapping out the marketplace with them in mind, and you found that what you expected or what you anticipated wasn't actually what would move the needle, and obviously started at a different place? But I'm just trying to understand if it was just a case of getting people engaged so that you're giving them what they want, but it's not necessarily changing anything, or if you've seen an actual impact by not doing what you thought and anticipated, and actually seeing that there was a knowledge there and understanding there that you didn't have. Sorry, it's a long question. I'm trying to frame it correctly, but what I'm just trying to understand is if it's not just about giving people what they want, like, is it, what did you uncover and unlock? Like, how did you uncover and unlock the value?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. That is a very important question. You remember when I said that I still believe that the quality of the product is still a problem. So one, when they suggested that they want market, they gave very valid reasons why that was their top in their priority. So so at times you have to give what people ask for, even though it might address, it might not address the main challenge, but along the way you find how to address the main challenge. So in our protocol of joining the marketplace, that is where we put the catch. So we are still working on it, but what we agreed on is that we will only admit products of a certain quality. And this is only possible once we can be able to drive enough traffic and people can start making sales there. And now we can easily put a condition that quality must be of this level, and we must also find a way of providing support to improve that quality. So if they will be able to see that the people whose products are of given quality are able to sell on the platform, then definitely they will be able to align. But as it is said, when you go to a community where people are hungry and they also probably lack some amenities, probably it might force you to give them food first to keep them alive as you are working on the main product. So because these informal workers are depending on daily bread. So to them, what can give them money first is top in their priority. And having your program accepted is very important, because if you also ignore what they want as a priority and do your own things, believing that it's going to help them, then most likely the whole idea, however good it is, might be rejected as well. So you must find a way of giving what they want, especially if if you can reason together and see where they come from according to their demand, and then find how you are able to create value within that space, and you'll be able to win in both ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and thanks, Steve, for the question. Are there any other questions for Martin? Or indeed, does anybody else have an experience to share? Because as I said, I'm sure that many of you have been doing this kind of thing in some way or other. And if anyone else would like to share any experiences that their makerspace has had of doing this, then we'd also like to hear about that. Okay, so if there's no more questions or contributions at the moment, I'm just going to tell you about one other example, which I mentioned briefly before, the UNICEF market dialogue in Kenya that was about involving suppliers and partners in conversations about how to better deliver kits to the people that they give products to. And I wanted to show you this output from that market dialogue, just as because it gives, within it, it gives you some feeling for how the dialogue was conducted, and also it might give you some ideas about sort of structure and how to feed back to participants and things like that. So this is an online report that was created after the market dialogue, and the link to it was sent out to all of the participants so that they could, you know, see back the content that had been generated. I'm hoping that you can see the Kits That Fit Kenya subproject on your screens now. If you can't, please somebody let me know. So this is the link. It, you know, reminds people about the event and talks about the organization, and talks about the vision that's been shared during the workshop. Then it goes on to start sharing back the information that was captured. So says this document was summarizes the input received from different working groups around suppliers and implementing partners. It talks about the assignment that was given to the participants in the workshop. So the questions they were asked were things like, what information would you need from UNICEF to be more responsive to community needs? And what types of systems or capacities do you already have, or would you have to set up to be responsive to community needs? And what would enable you to source emergency items more locally? So those were the questions that were asked of the suppliers. And then this goes on to summarize the inputs that were received. There are, you know, photos that were taken during the event. Talks about different topics that came up. There's some photos of the sort of small group discussions where people were gathered around tables working with post-its and, you know, looking at individual steps of the process. lots of content about different stages of the process. I'm not going into details because, you know, the point isn't the content that was generated from this market dialogue. It's just to let you see a different way of doing a market dialogue. Some of the some of the inputs that were received have been sort of called out, like the need to make product specifications more functional. Different stages of the process, like from signing of contract to delivery of goods, after distribution of goods. And then on to a different sector, the implementing partners. We've got photos of the, you know, the information that was collected, and then it's been pulled together into a table. And there was sort of an extra discussion that happened afterwards. And then there's, you know, it's pointing people to a video. So that was just to give you an insight into a different type of market dialogue. That was obviously that was like a one-day event in a hotel with, you know, specific people invited. That's not at all to say that's the kind that you need to do. But this is an opportunity now for you to ask questions about about any of this content, about what the market dialogue is and what you need to do. So please do put your hand up if you've got a question. And then in a moment, I'm going to go around the different makerspaces on the call and ask you for some of your initial ideas about what topics you might like to do a market dialogue on. And it doesn't have to be the topic that you end up using. It can just be one or two ideas that come to you first. Steve, and then Martin, I'll come to. So Steve, you first.
Thank you, Anna. I just wanted to understand how far the scope goes, like in terms of a market dialogue. Is it, so the one-day event that you talked about, would that be the entire process, or does it require like a backwards and forwards, or like a continuous development? And when you're asking for examples potentially of some of the things we might have done that maybe we didn't call a market dialogue, but so I was thinking of an event that we were facilitating with discussions around the fourth industrial revolution, and there was a lot of different parties from youth development and from industry, and then they had some young people as well that were part of the TVET, which is the what's it called, vocational training. And then they had these breakaway sessions where there was sort of a group discussion with all these different parties, and it's something that I certainly picked up from the discussion was and this learning I carry with me even today, was one of the young ladies involved who had studied electrical wireman and all that, so that she could go and be an electrician. She wasn't employed, and she was looking for work, and she said in order to like pay and to survive, she did some cooking. You know, she cooked food, and she had a little thing she did on a weekend, and she sold food, and it was actually she didn't call it a business, but it was a business, and it was actually doing pretty well. And so the learning for us on that particular example was that a lot of young people don't identify entrepreneurship, and we're using this word that is a loaded term that has a certain idea of people on front of magazines with fancy cars, and there's unemployed young people actually making a living doing what they might call a side hustle or something, and not actually realizing how much they're learning and that they actually are entrepreneurs, and where that can lead to. So it was quite a insightful realization, and that happened because there was all these different stakeholders, and we were using the same word, but we just didn't realize it meant different things to different people. So in that case, is that an example of a market dialogue, or is that sort of just market research, or is it something that is the start of a process that you then go back to and use because as I said, that sort of changed the way that I run some of the programs we run. So our entrepreneurial development programs, when we talk to our funders, we call it entrepreneurship, but when we talk to the participants, we call it side hustles, because entrepreneurship just sounds so fancy, and it's something that most people feel is not it's too big for them. So yeah, I'm just trying to like see what is it just a standalone thing you do and you're like, cool, that was an example, or what are the other mechanisms to continue to unlock, learning? So do you continue to meet with the same people, or do you just take that learning and build on it with the next group of people that you work with? And you can also use your example that you gave of that one-day event.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, from what you've said, it sounds like those workshops around the fourth industrial revolution, I would absolutely say that that's a market dialogue. It's just a means of engaging stakeholders into a conversation where it's not just sort of asking specific questions like, I don't know, do you like this or this option? It's encouraging an open conversation so that ideas can emerge that you hadn't thought of before, and different use of language around entrepreneurship is an example of that, is a great example of that. So yeah, I would really agree that that is an example. In terms of the process, so it depends a bit on what your topic ends up being. I would encourage you to very much think about it as an ongoing process rather than just a one-off event, but with the caveat that, of course, in the innovative manufacturing program, we've been able to give you a grant to run, to do this capacity building package, spend time on doing this one time, and have some money within that budget also for expenses if you needed to provide refreshments for people and things like that. I realize that you may not have that funding on an ongoing basis, or it might be, not something you can commit to doing very regularly, but I would encourage you very much to think about how to keep the dialogue going in some kind of low cost, low effort way. If you don't feel like you could do a big thing again. The example that I was talking about, the UNICEF example in Kenya, so there was an initial workshop, which was initially the idea was to do it as a one-off workshop, but essentially a lot of good value came from it. People on all sides realised that these were conversations that needed to be happening more often and weren't happening. And so the output that I showed you was actually from the second event, one-day event, which was held about 6 months after the first one-day event. It had some of the same people and some different people. But it referred back to the first event. There was a brief presentation of some of the outcomes from the first event, so there was that sense of continuity and making sure that people were aware how their inputs from before had been used. And the UNICEF are now talking about how to incorporate some aspect of this, not necessarily a full day event, but how to incorporate aspects of it into their ongoing processes. So, for example, with them, they have an annual planning cycle, and it might be that this is something that they fit into the annual planning cycle. Alternatively, because it's quite focused around suppliers, it might be something that they decide to do every time they're going to renew their long-term agreements with certain suppliers. So they're thinking about right now about how best to fit it in on an ongoing basis. That's because they've now recognized the value of it. It wasn't possible before, having done one, to say, to make that sort of commitment. I can also imagine that some types of market dialogue might lead to a different sort of outcome. So maybe in the example of having a market dialogue that lets you explore a potential new business model, for example, training, maybe you have the market dialogue and then the action that comes as an output of that is we're going to offer a training course to these people with these types of materials on it. And so then you go and do that. And then maybe you have some kind of a way of touching base with the stakeholders from your market dialogue at the end of your training course, letting them know what had happened, or revisiting the dialogue to get sort of, once you've tried it once, to get feedback on how you might do it a second time, something like that. So I would very much hope that there will be some actions that come out of the market dialogue, rather than it being a one-off event. And those might take the form of a sort of ongoing market dialogue, or it might look slightly different. So in the example that Martin gave previously, there was obviously the initial going to workshops and speaking to the artisans, and then out of that it was identified that there was this gap in information being provided by some of the government representatives, so they invited the government representatives and the artisans to the event at their space. Does this answer your question, Steve? It's hard because I don't want to be prescriptive about what your market dialogue leads to, looks like, and therefore what it leads to, but it would ideally be situated in some kind of an ongoing process.
Yeah, it does help a lot. So it's
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So Martin, coming to you next.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe give information or add that the Kenyan government has a type of a market dialogue which is called public participation, whereby when projects are to be done, then the information has to be taken to various people. They are able to sit together, discuss the merits and demerits of that project, even though the whole idea was that where people were to sit together, come up, prioritize the projects and give them to the government. But then what nowadays government does is they come with idea. Let's say we want to build this road. They go to the people. For example, right now we want to change the medical insurance for the country. And the whole idea is they need to go to the communities and give information, and then they discuss merits and demerits, and they get feedback from the people, what people say about it. And then with the feedback they get all over the country, then they can make informed decision. And I see it as one of those market dialogues where people get involved, they express how they think, and they can still tell you that they don't want that. For example, we had a bill for the finance bill, which they went around and people told them that we don't want it, but they ended up implementing it and ended up putting the country into demonstration. So, and again, that one also underscores why it is also important that when you go to market dialogue, you might be so sure that this is what is good for the people, but people might always know what is best for them. Thank you.
That's really a great point, Martin. Yes, thank you for that. If there are any more questions, do please put your hand up or just jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to start calling on makerspaces. So to just hear one or two ideas from you, initial ideas, responses about what you might do a market dialogue on. I can see we've got a few people here from IOMI 254. Is there anybody from IOMI who would be willing to just give us an initial response of some ideas of yours about the market dialogue?
Yeah, hello, and this is Mike
Hello, Mike.
from IOMI 254, but actually IOMI 001 in Mombasa. So, concerning market dialogues or what we've done, I can share. We once did a market assessment, and we had a project that we were doing with women entrepreneurship institutes that we host. We usually have a project that we host women from Mombasa, around 20 of them, where we support them from incubation to acceleration. But also the assessment was also to engage also as a fab lab. How can we, what's our need in the community? What's our need in terms of the people who actually are buying such things? So we need a market assessment. We went to tourist sites. We visited the county government offices of trade. We also hotels. We went to different sectors who are also donors, and also people who buy things that are customized or fabricated by labs. So especially people who host our own events, innovative events. So we're able to market also ourselves. So from the market assessment that we did, I think, and that's where people really need opened us out there. And from that, people knew, okay, there's a fab lab in Mombasa. There's actually a fab lab because people are used to fab labs being in Nairobi. So I can say that it was quite an opener to our source of income, because since then we've been receiving different I can say different requests to buy, not to buy, but to make for them different stuff. Like an example, we receive a huge deal, it's around 800K Kenyan money, just for company who wanted to do customized fabrication stuff for their staff during the Christmas holiday. So imagine these are just what do you call it? Cards. These are just how do you call it? Lanyards.
Oh yeah.
Cup holders, such things. So we were able to customize for them a different range of things that went to like a Christmas gift, and it was a whole package, which really, and it was something that was done by the youths here. It is because of the market assessment that they were able to see, okay, these people can do such and such. And also, not only that, people also, it created a lot of rooms for services. People knew we now operate CNC, we operate laser. So when they have the events, we're able to make them lanyards and tags, name tags for the activities. So other than that, also the county also really have been supporting us. In fact, now that after that market assessment, they knew exactly what we knew what they want, and also they knew what we were operating on. I think I've done a brief about what happened in terms of market dialogues. If I could add one thing, from that assessment, we were also able to do what we call market days. We saw that market days are very important for the lab. So we've been doing exhibitions in public days, like just the other weekend was the event tourism day, something like that was taking place at one of the public spaces here in Mombasa. It's called Mama Ngina. So we've been going for doing market days, our own market days, but also joining market days that are hosted by the county and that are hosted by the community or NGOs around. And this has really boosted our, in fact, awareness of the Fab Lab, but also getting clients to purchase stuff from the Fab Lab. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for sharing all that. And I really like what you said about talking about your market assessment, that people learned more about what you did and you learned more about what people wanted and what they needed. And I think, it's that two-way street that's really important for the market dialogue. So it's not just marketing outwards or gathering information inwards. It's very much having a process by which information is exchanged, and so new ideas can emerge from that. So we haven't heard from anybody from any of the Ghanaian makerspaces yet on today's call. So who would like to come in from DTI or from Kumasi Hive or Triple Dimension? Just to share a couple of ideas that you might have based on the presentation today. It doesn't have to be final, just your very initial reaction to what you're thinking you might do as a topic for your market dialogue. Nobody's jumping in. I'm going to have to pick on somebody. So I'm going to ask for Dawood, please. Dawood, are you able to unmute and just share some initial thoughts with us, please?
I think Dawood is no longer on the call. Yeah, I don't see him.
Oh, has he dropped
I
off?
only see his Firefly notator. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks, Gertrude. Okay. How about Michael Dankwa? Michael, can you come in?
Hello, Anna.
Hi.
Sorry, I was a bit lost on in the beginning. I was caught up in a meeting, but I think for DTI, in terms of our market dialogues, we have mostly been sending out products. So we have to engage our stakeholders. Usually, they are more laid back and don't expect some of the products that even come from our space. And we've had a case where we embarked on this project, the gutter desilting machine. And this is a device that fits within like the space of a standard gutter in Ghana. Usually in our spaces here, our gutters get really clogged up, and that leads to like so many other problems, diseases and floods and all. And the many challenges that we had on the stakeholder side, I mean, it's quite unbearable because we had to work with partner organizations. I don't want to name some names for now, but I think after like the first unsuccessful tests, it was starting to seem like a stress point for them. That okay, like we've gone through this project with you from like ideation stage up until the test point. First unsuccessful test, they're like, okay, go and come back. We did it with them and then tested again. After the second field test, they're like, okay, like from this point on, I don't think you would be able to get us to come around and be as involved. So we had to bring the project back in-house. And for about 3 years now, the project has been a bit still because we are not really getting that stakeholder connection to go back, retest, and then basically make it better and put it back out. So I think from our end, that's sort of like the challenge that we usually have. It's like the market or the stakeholders in the market sometimes don't open up to the innovation that we have because like in the present it may seem quite impractical because of the many tests that would have to be conducted to get it to work. Yeah, so I think that's an example that comes up from my end.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for that example. I'm really glad you raised that, because yes, I had forgotten to say that a particular product that you are developing can be a very good subject to have a market dialogue around. You know, ideally, the earlier in the product development process, the better, so that you can really understand what stakeholders need from the product before you go too far in designing it. But yes, bringing in people who suffer from a particular problem, regulators who have an influence on how products get approved, manufacturers of complementary products. This kind of thing could be a really interesting way to go around the market dialogue. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I would encourage you to look at, once you've identified a problem, which you can, you know, feel free to work with your mentor on that, you know, bounce ideas off anybody in the team about that. It could be that you're wanting to do it in relation to some topic around fundraising, or some topic around gender equity and social inclusion, you know, as well as the business models, or something that's nothing of those, but something you've been working on in the past. Once you've identified a topic, then you can move on to thinking about who and doing the planning for your event. And at that stage, I'd like to remind you to look at the training materials that are being shared with you, particularly those around stakeholder engagement, and including some around stakeholder mapping. Gertrude, do you want to just come in and just say a couple of words about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Anna. So materials has been uploaded on stakeholder engagements and stakeholder mapping. It's essentially those insights on how to identify your stakeholders, how to reach out to them, the kind of information you should look out for, and how to develop plans to engage them, and how to actually engage each one of them. Stakeholders are diverse. They have diverse interests. So it is not prudent that we do engage each one of our stakeholders the same way. And so the learning material essentially throws more light on that and how to go about that quite holistically. If you do go through the learning materials and you seek some clarifications, you can always reach out, and I'll be here to assist you. You can reach out via the WhatsApp or email at any point in time. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Gertrude. So those learning materials are available, and I encourage you to have a look at them, particularly if you're not sure about how to identify your stakeholders or think about how to engage them. So doing a stakeholder mapping exercise can be an input to your market dialogue, and holding the market dialogue itself may also form a part of your broader stakeholder engagement strategy. So you can have a think about that. And definitely do make good use of those materials. We're about getting to the end of what I wanted to cover today. Obviously, you can reach out at any point to Gertrude and to me to talk about ideas you might have and get feedback on your thinking of about the market dialogue. But I'd like you to be working on the plans for your market dialogue. If there are any more questions today, please feel free to jump in now. Otherwise, I'm just going to come on to notices for tomorrow. There is a peer learning session about running events. It's going to be led by Steve, and there's going to be a survey form being sent out that we'd like you to complete beforehand. Steve, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, just to ask everyone to take a bit of time to think about any events they've run that have been successful, unsuccessful, specifically paid events and or sponsored events that they've had to coordinate and plan, and just share spend some time just thinking about what they've learned, going through the form, so we can have a meaningful sharing session tomorrow.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that session. And you should have received from Rebecca a set of invitations to future peer learning sessions as well. So yeah, I think those are going to be very exciting. So thank you very much, all of you, for attending today and for taking part, for sharing your experiences. We're going to leave it there.